Welcome everyone, BG5 Live. This is episode 18. Vanessa, can you believe we've been doing this for 18 sessions? It's wild.
Yes and no.
Did we start in 2024 or 2023? Do you remember, Vanessa?
2024. So in May, it'll be a year.
Okay, so we're coming up on a year. Today's class is a little bit of a mix. We're going to be talking about one topic. So Vanessa and I decided over the break that we would begin switching our focus. We wouldn't talk about the transits as much, and we're going to be moving into more topics. And one of the biggest topics we're going to be discussing this year is skills. So we're looking at BG5 through the lens of skills, which means the things that we bring to a business, what the Penta pulls out. So we'll be exploring that later this month. But today we're going to be focused on the topic of cycles. So I get the wonderful pleasure of working with Vanessa and Eva Marak, who are going to be joining me to teach the cycles class, which is happening on Mondays, a little bit later this month. So I'm going to be, to do that, we're going to explore some themes of cycles, and then by permission, both Sarah and Vanessa are joining me, and we're going to look at, Sarah is in the midst of her Saturn, which is a 30-year cycle, and Vanessa is on the other side looking at her Chiron. So we're going to be talking about these cycles and the changes they can bring. So Vanessa, we have to have you do your introduction. Tell us about what BG5 is, Live is, so anyone new listening.
All right. Welcome to BG5 Live. And this is the show for BG5 and human design professionals, students, and enthusiasts who would like a deeper understanding on how to apply human design to business so that they can thrive in their own careers and help support their clients in doing the same. So that is what we are all about here at BG5 Live.
I just love when you do that. You have the best podcast voice ever. So I'm here with some of my favorite people in the BG5 world. So of course Vanessa's here, which I just love working with. We also have Sarah. So Sarah is the head honcho. That's going to be on her card, head honcho of the BG5 world. So she is joining us today. Sarah is in the midst of her Chiron. So she gave me permission to look at her chart, and we'll be exploring that. And so Sarah has some good questions for us to answer. Before we jump into the cycles, I thought I would touch in on, as opposed to the cosmic weather, this is the transit for the day. So the reason I'm doing this in a very specific way today. So it's looking at the cycle chart, but just for today, and it's actually just at this moment. But I'm looking at it through the lens of my design. So if you have a video picture here, you can see this. So on the right is my chart. On the left is my chart transposed with the daily cycle or the daily transits. So if you can't see, that's all right. I have one particular strength in my design. So anytime someone tells you that they have one strength in their design, basically it means they just have one strength that connects just two functions, which automatically means that that person has 7 open functions. So in human design, BG5, we know that any open function is a place of potential sensitivity. When we're thinking about it in the most positive terms, we talk about it in terms of wisdom, but it's also can be, it may be experienced as a stressor, or those are the places that your shadows show up. So when you look at the transit for the day transposed, it's like a mini cycle. So I have open emotions, I have an open drive stamina, I have open identity, and I have open survival instincts. So those places today are defined. So how it shows up, and so this is interesting to think about, because I think about it is we're always trying to come into alignment with our core design, our natal design. So the design that we're born with. But every day, every place you go, there are going to be people, transits, something influencing you. How you respond to that influence is what makes all the difference. So when I look at this chart for myself, this particular transit is the 3536, the experiencer. So it's this particular emotional wave that's actually been in for a long time, that I've had been experiencing these emotional waves. And then sometimes some other influences will come in. And so someone who's non-emotional, meaning that they don't have these sort of bigger waves going on all the time, can feel this pressure, this emotional pressure. And sometimes, again, depending on the transit, it can bring your energy really down, meaning that the wave is down. And so that's something that I get to experience. It's not always the best thing in the world. You'll see some others. One other point that I'll bring up is when you have a completely open function and it's defined in a transit in one way or another, that puts extra pressure on you. So I'll just use this as an example. So I have the roots, the drive stamina function. I have it completely open. That's a place that brings a lot of physical stress into my life. And so it's one of those things where it's an area that, again, if you have a completely open function, that's a place that you're very, very, very sensitive to. So you can imagine having that pressure sort of working on you. So today, what I feel is this physical energy in my body. Sometimes it can just feel like my body's revving. So I'm sharing my process with you to help you understand when you look at the daily transits in relation to your own chart, then you can begin to find out for yourself, oh, that's not really me. This thing that's happening that makes me feel a little bit out of control or stressed or uncomfortable, that's just this energy dynamic. So I'll say that to myself a lot of times that, oh, this is just a transits. This is just an energy. This is just a dynamic that's happening. It's not actually me. So that's one of the things that we'll be exploring in the cycles class. That's sort of the basic level of what you can think about in terms of these cycles, but it's good to track this on a daily basis or a weekly basis just to understand, oh, we really are influenced by, the transits going on. Dinesh, do you have any stories, anything you'd like to share about your experiences? It could be today or, whatever, your experiences of cycles. I mean, like more like daily transits.
Well, I will say, as somebody who has 8 defined functions, when the 9th one gets defined by a transit, it feels almost like confining, almost like I'm stuck somehow. Like there's not a lot of flexibility there. And I'm already somebody who is very mentally active, and sometimes I do a daily meditation practice first thing in the morning, and sometimes I notice like it's just, and I've been meditating for years. I still struggle with it, as you can probably tell by my defined conceptualization function. There's a lot that happens there. So when the inspiration function also gets defined by a transit, sometimes I'll be like, I wonder what's going on. And I will have one of those, meditative periods that are not very meditative. And I'll check the transits, and lo and behold, defined inspiration function as well. So that's one of my experiences when I am fully defined through transit.
Yeah. And you have, as I was just mentioning, you have your inspiration, which again is the human design terms, it's the head center. You have that function totally open as well. So I can only imagine that So the inspiration function is a pressure function. So it's the pressure is to think and make sense of those thoughts ultimately. And so I can imagine that that must feel like this really intense pressure for you. Yeah. The transits. How fun. We're going to move up to more bigger, longer term cycles. So we're going to look at two particular cycles. In human design terms, we call them the Saturn and the Chiron. So that's the 30 and the 50-year cycle. So something to understand about these cycles is you actually have what's called a cycle date. The date that actually that's the point at which it really begins to start. But the actual energies for these longer term, like 20-year cycles, they actually begin a couple years ahead of time. So let's say that you have your Saturn, it's on a date when you're actually somewhere when you turn 30. The Saturn would begin at around 27, give or take, and then it would last through age 33. So it's typically this kind of 5 to 6 year window of time. So the themes start coming in, and then they begin to seat. When I talk about this concept seating, it begins to ground in. So we'll get to look at this through two particular charts. One is Sarah and one is Vanessa. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about what this is all about before we get into some of the nitty-gritty. So this is a little bit of a teaching, just to give you a sense of what we're talking about here. Before we begin, I thought we'd have a little story time. So Vanessa, we get to share, and Sarah, when we come to you, we'll ask you a question about this. So these are what I call these inflection points. Inflection points are moments of change. So before the inflection point, you're going along, you're having your life, it looks like this. The inflection point happens, the change begins, and then on the other side, you are someone who's completely different. Now, it doesn't always have to be that radical, but it can be. So there's three major points, 30, 40, and 50. So Vanessa, do you have, at either one of those points, do you have a story about sort of like a major inflection for you?
So I will say that both with my Saturn and my Uranus opposition, I was that typical, like I was a completely different person on the other side, and massive changes through both of them. Both of them included long distance moves, and double long distance moves. So during my Saturn, I moved from Los Angeles to Boston to Northern California. During my Uranus, I moved from Northern California back to Los Angeles and then back to Northern California. So there's always big moves involved, like physically big moves. And during my Saturn, and I didn't know about human design, I did luckily know about astrology, so I knew that I was in it. This was the time that I left. I'd been working in the finance sector. I'd gone to school for finance. I'd been like living the corporate life, and I was absolutely, completely, and totally miserable. And I somewhere right around age 28, 28 and a half, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know it's not this. Like, I literally can't do it anymore. And I quit my job. I had money saved up. I knew I was in Saturn, luckily, and I gave myself time to figure out like what it was that I was going to do. And fast forward towards the end of my Saturn, and I was teaching full-time movement, dance, Pilates. I'd gone on this whole completely different like trajectory of my life that was so removed from my corporate days. So that would be one example of a very big change.
Yeah, that's a good story. I like how you shared that not only was it internal movement for you, it was also external movement. I'll share a really quick Saturn return 30-year milestone, which was up until my 30s, I was totally identified with being an athlete. You know, in high school, I played football. You know, when I went to college, I did karate, and just everything about my life up until age 30 was completely sort of through my body. It was just everything was movement and exercise. And then literally, I wish I had recorded it at the time. There was a 2-week period where suddenly I couldn't train anymore. So I was like, I thought I would be a karate person for the rest of my life. I had this whole vision that I was going to be, this 50-year-old, like ancient master. And I just suddenly, I couldn't train in karate anymore. And it literally happened over 2 weeks. Every day I would put my karate gear in the car. I would go off to work. And then at the end of the day, I would say, okay, I'm going to go train. I literally just couldn't. And so I don't think it's always that abrupt, but literally for me, it was just 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, I realized I can't do this anymore. And I don't know why. And I was completely bereft. It was as if I lost someone near and dear to my life. Not training in karate was like giving up an arm. It was that huge of a milestone. And so what was on the other side was more internal, more healing, more spiritual. So I went from outer physical to inner healing, inner spirituality. That inflection point represented a major, major change in my life. Now, as Vanessa and I were talking about this, for people who are listening, these points, these cycle moments in time, don't always bring this level of change. One of the reasons we're talking about it in this way is if it does happen, you're not going crazy. There's nothing wrong. In fact, it represents a new cycle of your life, a new part of your life evolution. And so the more that you can accept it, the more you're going to really sort of move into it. So let's talk a little bit about what cycles we talk about in the class. So keep in mind, when you're thinking about cycles in terms of BG5, we're talking about understanding these points in relationship to your career, in relationship to your business. So when you have these points in time, and your business or your career will probably most likely shift. Now, one of the cycles we're not talking about here, which is really important, is annual cycles. So every year, starting 3 months before your birthday, you have what's called a solar cycle, which is the year ahead, which will begin 3 months before the date of your birthday. Today, we're just covering the bigger cycles. So we have the Saturn. So this is before, give or take 30. Sometimes people have it at 29. Sometimes it's, 30 something. So we have the Saturn. The Uranus can be big for some people. For me, it looked like it was smooth as ice. It was really easy. So that's the 40-year mark. And then the Chiron is at the 50. So those are the 3 major cycles, again, give or take, that are going to happen. There's also a 4th one that we'll be talking about in the class. That's the second Saturn. That's the one I'm in. So that's the late 50s, 60-ish. So that's another demarcation point as well. So the difference between annual and larger cycles is the annual cycle is really about your decision making, coming back into your core design, making decisions correctly, relying on your strengths, understanding what your shadows are. And the annual cycle will bring change through that particular year. So we get to go deeper into the annual, like all the different shifts that are going to happen on the annual level, as opposed to the bigger cycles. So in the bigger cycles, when we call them sessions, or it could be a longer term coaching, it's looking at themes over a longer period of time, which is roughly about 20 years, give or take. So we just cover the bigger aspects of the cycles in those larger cycles. So why are cycles, and I put in this in the asterisk, is coaching sessions important? Because it can be helpful to not only get cycle session is to get coaching through that process, especially again in the longer term cycles. So it helps you to get these signposts, these landmarks. Oh, this thing is happening. I'm not crazy. You also, like Vanessa was talking about, you may start to shift the places you live and work. So we can actually track some of that in the charts that we're going to see in a moment. We can also map out what are some themes that you're going to be learning in this new cycle. And finally, we talk about roles. So we have a public role in our charts. And so we also have public roles, not for the annual cycle session, but for the longer term, the 30, the 40, and the 50-year cycles. So our public role actually changes in a way you never lose your birth public role. You never lose your birth public, your design, but you'll have themes, as if these themes will overlay your design and they become sort of a lens that you look through. So let's jump into some of the things. So when you're looking at the software, and if your software has access to the cycles, you'll look at those cycles and you say, oh, there's these things that are coming up and I don't really understand. So I'm gonna go through these really briefly to give you a sense of what it means in terms of your cycles. So there's 5 different areas. We call them weather impact themes. So when you see what's called the compromise strength, it's very similar to in a relationship session. That's when you have one trait, and usually in a relationship, it's the person has the whole strength, so it overshadows you, it covers you. But in a cycle, the cycle brings that theme that can feel a place where you can feel it's personally challenging to you. Those places that those compromised strengths, that's going to feel personal to you during the course of your cycle, whether it's yearly or on a larger scale of 20 plus years. Educational strengths, this is when you don't have any definition in a particular strength, but it's in the cycle. We call this dominance. This is the theme that you're going to be learning about in the coming year. Personal connection, it's also an electromagnetic. You have one trait, the cycle brings the other. This represents people who you're going to meet, people you're going to have a connection with. So one of the interesting things that Vanessa and I were just looking at this. So Vanessa has one particular trait in her design, and I particularly have the other. So that's one of the reasons that she and I came together. So I bring sort of particular energy that Vanessa is, that sort of like it's completing her. No, it's not doing that, but it's just bringing certain lessons into your life. Natal strengths are just your particular strengths in your chart. Those are the ones that you can count on. Environmental are traits defined by the cycle that do not create a strength. Those are just, again, themes to explore and learn. So we're going to get into an example here. So we'll start with Sarah. So Sarah, before we jump in, your Saturn, you began it this year. So it was actually in February of this year. So this is a big question, I know. Have you noticed any changes happening for you as you've hit your Saturn?
Yes. And I think what's also brought some challenge to it is I had 2 babies leading up to it. And so your body's already going through such a big shift, right? Like you're literally giving birth, you're creating life. There's no other creation like it. And so that it was kind of, I think that added like some complexity for it because I was experiencing all this change and almost like I was becoming a different person. I was having so many realizations, just about my life and my childhood, these aha moments, and it was very emotional. And so balancing everything in my personal life with having two young children, but then also like really needing to spend some time like alone to process everything. And I'm still doing that. Like that part was challenging. And it almost it was a slow transition, and I feel like it's still happening of like I'm almost becoming a different person. It's like Sarah 2.0. So, and I think that just comes like with the realizations, and I have some conflicting things, right? Because I went from feeling so social and always wanting to be in the mix, right? To now retreating and wanting to spend more time alone, physically, emotionally, just I need alone time to process everything. So I think that's kind of been the biggest changes I've noticed so far.
It's interesting just hearing your story. I was looking at your Saturn cycle charts and realizing I can understand. It's almost like you can see the places in this. So we'll highlight. The other thing I love that you said, and I know probably Vanessa and myself, that 2.0 version is really powerful. Again,
Mhm.
it's you come in one way and you leave another.
Yeah. And I'm also curious, and I'm learning, I'm still learning. So, correct me at any point or add to it. But being a 4/6 profile, the first 30 years is like a third line. And so there's a lot of trial and error. But the 6 is unconscious for me. And so that was hard. There was a lot of things in my life and growing up that it was just challenging. And I had this like, why me mentality? Like, why is this happening to me? Why does this not work out? And then I noticed as I started to get into my Saturn return uh and that happened, yeah, about a year ago. And even a little bit leading up to it, I started transitioning my thinking a bit of like just having these aha moments. And I wonder, if that's where the 64 of abstraction comes in, right? Like there's like this confusion, all of these things are happening in my life. I'm not sure why they're happening, but I want to make sense of it because the mind wants to do that and relieve you. But as I got more into my Saturn return and it completed, it felt more and more relief because that confusion started to go away a bit. Right. And then I can understand that things just happen, or I could see the bigger picture, connected all the puzzle pieces, and then therefore don't have to have that victim mentality anymore, which is relieving.
That's so I love how you brought that to light. So for our listeners who cannot see our visuals here, so Sarah, her life purpose is the 64-63 on the conscious side and the 35-5. So it's the cross of consciousness, or the life purpose of consciousness. And so a big theme for Sarah is exploring sort of consciousness through the mind. And so the 64 is about confusion and the 63 is about doubt. So it makes sense for Sarah that though that confusion is, she has these experiences going on, and there's a certain point when an experience comes to completion, awareness dawns. Same, the 63, which is doubt, works a little bit differently. So Sarah's talking about this. I've had these epiphanies. I've had these aha moments. And I think one of the reasons that Sarah highlighted is she's coming to this completion point, which is everything that happened before age 30, everything that happened before the Saturn, everything that happened before this 30-year cycle. So a shift begins. So it makes sense that you, Sarah, are going to have these epiphanies, and sort of it feels like there's some level of completion.
Mhm.
Now, the other thing to look at, any questions about that or thoughts you want to add, Sarah?
No, I noticed it's still in progress though. And I, well, it should be, right? Because that's my life work theme. So, you know, but having some awareness around it makes those growing pains a little easier, right? Instead of trying to fix something, just let it be.
I love the smile on your face. It says, I'm okay, I'm not crazy. Because we all feel that, especially in major cycles. And you're in a major cycle. One of the things we used to in human design, so I come from I both have a BG5 and human design background, and we used to do these things called the cross of life sessions. So cross of life was the, you know, the core essence and the grounding on both the conscious and unconscious side, and then what we call the nodes, or the future and past direction. So we look at the major, so the major theme, which is your life expression, as you just talked about. And when we look at the nodes, or the future and past directions, we look at your environment, the people you're going to meet, the environments you're going to sort of thrive in, and how that's going to show up for you. Those are the two major points that we really look at in a big way in our cycles. So Sarah has this natal public role as the 4-6. In the Chiron, the Saturn, it's going to be a 6-2. So that 6 in the first part of the cycle is more like a 3, which means, Sarah, you're going to run into a lot of new people. You're going to have a lot of new experiences. You're going to have a lot of trial and error. So people are going to come and people are going to go. Some ways we talk about the 3 as, some ways it's bonds made and broken. So you can expect, especially in the first 10 years, for say, like, you know, from now until 40, there's going to be people flowing in and out of your life. That's just going to be normal. And you, as the head of the school, you'll be bringing people in. You're also going to bring new students. They'll come, they'll study, and they'll graduate. So that's going to be really normal for you. At some point during the second part for you is this idea of you're going to start moving into this role of a role model. You're going to take the wisdom that you've learned, especially after 40, and it's going to feel like, I'm actually starting to grow up now. That's what happens in our 40s. I don't know about Vanessa, and you can tell me this too. Before I was 40 something, I still secretly felt like a little kid. I still felt like a little boy that I was playing grown up. And it was this weird experience. I didn't think it didn't end until about 48 or so, when I started to feel like I'm starting to grow up. I'm finally an adult. So, Vanessa, did you experience that at all?
Oh, I'm never gonna grow up. I'm still there.
One of the other things, again, you can't visually see it, but on the left side of our little diagram is Sarah's, what we call her natal chart, or birth chart. So she has 5 different functions defined, which means she has 4 open. So she has her survival instincts, which is, you know, intuitive awareness, the roots, or the drive stamina, emotions, and willpower. Those 4 places are open. 3 of those are motors. And the survival instinct is the place where fear resides, in the sense of the survival instincts, it's the intuitive awareness, it's trying to keep you safe. Those 4 functions are defined in her Saturn cycle chart. So you're here to, in the best way possible, you're here to learn about emotions, about will, about drive stamina, and about intuitive awareness. That's the most positive side. On the shadow side, which you're going to probably really struggle with, is you're going to struggle with emotions. You're going to struggle with trying to prove yourself. You're going to struggle with stress. And there's going to be these kind of primal fears. All of those themes are learning themes for you. Now that you know it, when it happens, you get to say, hey, that's just my theme for this year. So you get to be a master at, not proving yourself, at understanding how to deal with other people's emotions, how to deal with stress, how to deal with fear. Those themes will take place over time. New challenges will keep coming in, and you'll keep learning because that's what you're designed to do. Beginning to understand that, like you already started talking about it. I'm learning about my emotions. I'm learning about this. I'm learning about that. Those are really strong, important themes for you to explore. Probably so much more I could talk to you about. Questions, really simple. I know we would, I just covered this really simple. Oh, one last thing. One of Sarah's educational themes is the 3420. Vanessa and I are both 3420s. Vanessa, any advice you would give Sarah as, a double express builder with her 3420? Because Sarah's regular design, she's an express builder, but with the 3420, she gets this extra jolt of energy. Do you have any advice for her?
Just being present, like really focusing on being present, being in your body, listening to yourself and your decision-making strategy, your personal interaction style or strategy and authority. And you may encounter some impatience.
And what?
You may encounter some impatience.
Yeah.
I would add to what Vanessa said, Sarah, is 3420s, when they're younger, they feel like they have this infinite amount of energy, just to go, like the quintessential Energizer Bunny. You are meant to be more discerning in this next cycle about how you use your energy. Even though you have a lot, it's designed to be used very specifically for certain things. So your body will want to do very specific, narrow things. Your body is going to say, I don't want to do all of this. I want to do this, more specific.
Mm-hmm.
So you still have the same amount of energy that you do now, but you're going to use it effectively, you want to sort of narrow it down to focus. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. Any questions before we move on to Vanessa?
What you said about the shadows that will come into play during this cycle and what I'm here to learn. I was just thinking that it feels pretty special to me, which sounds crazy because we've talked before that my shadows are quite challenging for me at times. But I have this new perspective of, right, that like maybe some things in my life are supposed to be hard and I can make sense of it and share it with others and empower them because my life purpose is fulfilled through bonding. And it's really interesting how people sometimes come into my life for a period of time. And I've always struggled with, then we have to end that relationship, right? Because, and I've talked to you about that before, Mike, that I can get very close with people and it's very difficult for me when it's time, to leave because you can't maintain all these relationships. But rather than like feeling beat up about that or sad, it's like I just feel so inspired, and I just feel so grateful that what a life I get to live. And like we'll see what it looks like, right? You can't plan it out, and you don't know who's going to come into your life, but I have a feeling that, you know, at the end of my life I'll be able to look back and, you know, make a difference, right? And that's going to be through the people that come into my life and the wisdom that I'm able to share as I, you know, keep going through these different cycles.
Yeah. So a metaphor just popped in for you, Sarah. So imagine you're sitting on a riverbank and a river's going by, but you're on the bank, so you're stationary. You're here, you're living your life. But there's going to be people who come by who are going to touch into your energy field. They're going to touch into your wisdom. So the more that you're aligned, and I can hear that you really have a focus on, I want to live as my authentic self. I want to live in a way that I express myself to the fullest. There's going to be a lot of people who pass through who are going to take what they need as they sort of go down the river. And so you have no control about who comes, how long they stay, but you can just give them everything you can, and then they'll move through. You do have a lot to offer. You really do. So thanks for sharing. That was really fun
Thanks,
to do this
Mike.
with you.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
fun.
So we're going to move on to the Chiron next. Before we move into Vanessa's, which I'm really excited to do, I want to share, if you're thinking about doing this work with clients, especially in a business context, one of the things that I want to share with you is that in human design, we used to talk about it as just one session. For you as a BG5 coach consultant, I want you to think about it in terms of working with people over time. These themes are really strong and they're going to feel so different as it comes in. It's going to feel like, whoa, why is this happening to me now? You, as the psychoanalyst, will be able to help them understand this is why. And you're going to be doing a lot of shadow awareness exercise, a lot of shadow awareness sort of highlighting for your clients who are going through these themes, through these cycles. So Vanessa, do you have any questions or thoughts before we look at your particular Chiron?
I do have a thought. So I'm noting the time, and in order, I think, for us to stay true to our format, I was thinking, what if we push Chiron and maybe bring in a little bit of Uranus to the next BG5 live?
That sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, so Vanessa and I agreed early on that we wouldn't have our podcasts go on forever and ever and ever. That we'd keep it to like 35, 40 minutes. Yeah, so the next time we'll do a follow-up. I have one thought. Vanessa, Sarah, do you have any thoughts that you want to share before we sign off? I had one that I forgot already.
I was just wondering if Eva wanted to share. We have some guests today that joined live, and so I just wanted to open it up to see if anyone if anything resonated with you, if you had an aha moment and wanted to share. We have Eva, Marina, and Tiffany.
I just noticed, Sarah, when you were talking about bonding. So Marina and I are both purpose fulfilled through bonding. I'm public role 3/6, and she's 4/6 as you. And yeah, it was just curious to observe that we are bonding girls.
Yeah.
Yeah, relationships are really important.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because right now I'm feeling like I want to retreat more and not be around people. So then I'm like, well, then how is my purpose fulfilled through bonding if I don't want to be around anyone? But it's like all in the right timing. I do create bonds still. It just maybe looks different than it did before I
Right,
turned 30, for at
right.
least for now.
And sometimes we might not need 100 people around us. Sometimes the right people can be 1, 2, or 3 people that we bond to and make something significant or powerful together, or yeah.
Yeah. And I'm also maybe going through a little bit of, bonds made, right, prior to 30. And now some of them are being broken to make room for new bonds in this new phase of life, which could possibly be happening for me. So stay tuned.
Yeah.
But I had the same thing. Like when you were saying you had difficulties with, like breaking these bonds. It's the same for me. I always, or I often think back of people that, came into my life and that, really contributed to it, and where maybe I had the feeling that I contributed to their lives, and then they're not there anymore. That's, yeah, I don't know. You just have to let it be, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about the Chiron next session, and we'll look at through the lens of Vanessa's chart. But I want to share this before we sign off. Chiron, I'm noticing this more and more in my life, where people who are going through their Chiron or their 50-year cycle are going through major shifts. I don't know for certain, but my theory is that as we get closer to 2027, that a lot of people who especially going through these kind of cycles right now are really being called energetically, spiritually, to really align with who they are. And so I'm seeing these kind of major changes in people sort of all around me who are in this particular phase of their life. And one of the things that I see is happening, they're going in on themselves. They feel like, I'm 50, I shouldn't be having this happen to me. Which, again, we have this unique opportunity to help people understand, no, what's happening is you're not falling apart, you're just sort of aligning with some bigger vision for your life. So we want to reframe these times that happen and to say, I'm not falling apart, there's nothing wrong. You feel this pressure of people looking in at your life and saying, what's wrong with you? When again, there's nothing actually wrong. It's just a realignment. So that's one of the ways that I want us to think about this idea of these changes. They bring growth ultimately, but it doesn't look like that at the beginning. Sometimes it looks the complete opposite. So on that note, so we'll be back in 2 weeks. Vanessa, Sarah, Eva, Rena, thank you for joining us as always. So we'll be signing off. And again, if you are interested in the cycles class, we will be beginning. Sarah, what's our cycles, the start of our cycles class?
It starts on Monday.
The
Let's
20th.
see. I think it's Monday. I want to say at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
It's noon
Yes,
Eastern.
and it's 5 p.m. UTC.
Yep.
What day do we start, on the 20th or the 27th?
It's the 20th, and there's a very special offer with this course that you can attend the first class free. So no matter where you're at in your journey, if you haven't even taken foundation, or if you are a certified consultant, anywhere in between, you are welcome to register for the first class free to get a taste of what the cycles class is like, get a feel for Mike's frequency. And if you would like to convert to a student, those that are qualified, if you're in certification, then we would love to have you in the course with Mike and Vanessa and Eva.
Thank you, everyone. So next Monday is our
Bye,
kickoff
everyone.
date.
Yep. Hope to
Thank
see
you,
you there,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye for
Thank you.
now.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.